I'm fascinated by your claim of 45 days, right? Tell us more about what is that program and why is it so great that you can do it in 45 days?
So let's have a little caveat, first of all, so that we can't guarantee 45 days for anyone, right? Because different levels, amount of jobs, industries, there are so many things. And if you don't do the work, I can't be responsible for that. What I found was when I was working with people individually before I started the sprint, was that about 35 days, everything seemed to change.
Welcome to the Vision to Reality podcast. I'm your host, Curtis L. Jenkins, and in each episode, I speak with industry experts, thought leaders, and innovators to break down the strategies, techniques, and methods that turn their ideas into reality. Whether your vision is to scale your business, build and lead a winning team, prepare for your next big career move, this podcast is for you. Let's get started and bring your vision to reality. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Vision to Reality podcast, where we highlight accomplished leaders who have turned their personal and professional visions into reality. I'm your host, Curtis Jenkins, and today we're talking about smart strategies to land the job faster. And joining me in this conversation is Sarah Bryer, who has deep experience as an in-house and agency recruiter, team manager, and operations leader across finance, insurance, and advertising. Sarah specializes in guiding mid and senior level professionals who've been searching for a new role, sometimes for months, without success. Her passion lies in getting into the weeds with clients who are feeling stuck, overlooked for promotion, or navigating redundancy, as she provides real-time expert feedback and proven strategies they need to get traction in today's job market. Sarah has decades of experience in recruitment and operations and is a natural problem solver and nosy Parker. She's a straight talker and will tell you the things others are afraid to. Ooh, I can't wait to talk about that. But she will always deliver it with kindness in mind next time. All right, so let's get right into it. Welcome, Sarah.
Saying nosy Parker sounds really cool in your accent, but I guess it's not an Americanism, is it?
It's not. So that's why when I read it, I said, okay, I'm going to read it, but you'll tell me what it means.
It means I'm just a nosy person. I like to know things.
Got it. But I think you like to know things because in order to help people, you got to know some things, right?
Yeah. And to solve problems, whatever this job search looks like for people, it's all about solving little problems, little iterations. This is the smart strategies to find jobs, to land jobs faster. And it's not just about rinsing and repeating the same thing that we did 5 years ago.
Yeah. Okay. So what should we be doing now?
Well, where to start, Curtis? Well, I guess maybe should we start with a little bit of a history lesson for the folks that maybe haven't looked for a job in a while?
Absolutely.
So probably a couple of years ago, even 5 years ago before COVID, we applied for jobs and humans roamed the earth. Humans would tend to look at our documents and we make assumptions. We stereotype. There are nuances that where we would look at somebody's background and we would go, I know someone that worked there. They were great. Or we've hired people from that company before. They have great training or, this kind of stuff that is just in your head. Now what's happening is we're using more technology. We're using AI, applicant tracking systems are having to do the job that they were designed for. And now we've got systems that are pushing up applicants, but also suppressing them. Probably a few years ago, you'd get 50 applications for a job and a human could go through them fairly swiftly. A recruitment colleague put on LinkedIn a few weeks ago that she had 297 applications in 48 hours. And most humans can't deal with that volume, not properly. Anyway. And so she said that she would, she went through all of those by hand, but I don't believe everyone does. And I don't believe if you've got these big global corporations that they're going through them by hand either, because they cut their talent teams too. So we've got a bit of a problem because the biggest problem is, Curtis, is that no one told the job seekers. No one taught them the new ways because they didn't tell them that they needed to optimize their document. They had to put keywords in. They didn't really tell them that, actually your CV can't be written in Canva because the system will see it as a photograph. No one tells them that until they kind of come across a weird LinkedIn post with me ranting in the middle of the night about how unfair it is for job seekers. So, the problems are just typically that the technology has galloped along and the ordinary people that are on the other side of it just haven't had the memo.
So the technology has galloped along, to use your term, but also the jobs are different since COVID. And so how are the jobs different and the behaviors there? Like there's remote work, there's this quiet quitting, there's all these different things. So it seems like the technology is creating a chasm, but so is the job landscape itself. How do we navigate that?
I think everything evolves, doesn't it? Like, I watched the movie Big. Do you remember the movie Big with Tom Hanks?
Yes.
Well, it's a good movie. But when he starts his job, he has that big colossal computer. And they're probably doing something there where there was like 100 people in that office. They were probably doing things there that we would do in a second now. And jobs are always evolving. We're always moving along. But it's the same problem that the world is, the management consultants are writing these job descriptions and these really clever people with PhDs are writing these amazing things. But the job seekers are looking at these job descriptions and being like, oh my God, I don't know if I can do that because they're using all this fancy language. And really it's just filing, but they've made it sound amazing, But the jobs are changing. But instead of organisations and being responsible for the people that they hire, they just get rid of them. Like I had some clients who worked for a company in the US but they were in the UK. And in the UK, you have to get notice of your redundancy. Like there's all these proper processes. You have to get severance and all the rest of it. It's awful for us, but it's humane. They were treated as if they were Americans. And so they had their Slack access cut like that and no one told them. They just got a note that they were losing their job. And that was that. But these organisations tend to keep people till they've used them enough instead of upskilling them. So we're just these cyclical redundancies constantly. Instead of looking forward and going, do you know what? We're going to need AI skills in the future. Why don't we go and teach Maud about machine learning? No, what we'll do is we'll just keep her doing the thing that she's doing, not training her, not developing her. And then she's redundant and she goes out into the world and she's got really old skills.
Yeah. So you mentioned the difference between working in the UK and working in the US. Do you work with US clients?
I do. It's usually a time difference thing that's a problem.
Mm-hmm.
I stay up late. And the problems are all the same. It's the volume of applications that's out there. It's about standing out. It's this little course correction, which is the thing that I'm best known for, and not taking no for an answer. If all you're doing is sending the same document out that you've not changed to 100 companies a week, applying for 100 jobs a week and not doing anything else, you're not going to get a job. That might have worked 5 years ago because it was a numbers game. It's not a numbers game anymore.
Yeah. So when I did your introduction, you tell people things that others are afraid to. What are some of those things that most of us are afraid to tell people? But, I'm imagining you grabbing somebody by the shoulders and saying, you got to know this. What is it that you have to tell people that others are afraid to tell?
Sometimes, Curtis, it's the most uncomfortable things.
Mm-hmm.
It's things about, like in the UK, and I'm sure that you guys have it in the States too, is that we are very biased. We're uncomfortably so sometimes. The world is a bit of a mess at the minute, Curtis, isn't it? And I worked with a recruiter about 20 years ago who wouldn't call somebody because she couldn't pronounce their name. And this was 20 years ago and it really sticks with me. And it makes me the sort of person, whereas if I find a name that I've never come across before, that I'll Google it and see if I can find a pronunciation, because I just want to not look like I'm an idiot, And so a client the other day has got a really long Sri Lankan name. And I said, he goes by a shortened version of it. And I said, instead of putting this long name on your CV, how do you feel about cutting it? And he was like, what he thinks is that it needs to be his official proper name because it's an official document. And I'm like, what I worry is that people won't call you because of this. And there are so many studies that have been done, whereas you're sending the same CV and it's got in our case, what would be described as a white English name, Dave Jones, for example, as opposed to a name that isn't white or English. And those responses are very, very different. You know, the person with a white sounding name gets more responses. And having a conversation with somebody about this, not about changing themselves because you can't, but this kind of instant bias that when I see your name, I think I'll probably call someone else, you know, or, you know, the dates on their CV. There's so many people who are conscious of their age that when they get into their 50s, they're thinking, oh my God, people think I'm old and people think this. And actually there's so much value in having these conversations because a lot of people think it, you know, a lot of brown and black people in our country think these things are happening, but they might not talk about it with me because, you know, because of how they've been made to feel before. And I try to open that door. I don't know what it's like to feel like that, but if we can help get through some of that and take the dates off your CV that don't matter, you know, if you finished college in 1981, no one needs to know that. Let's just whip it off, you know, and there's some of these things that is just about kind of getting over this bias. When someone meets you, they're going to know what your accent's like or, you know, what colour your skin is and all of that sort of stuff. But how can we get you through that door and just remove this bias as much as possible?
Yeah. So that bias is real. And
100%.
I'm glad that you brought it up. I mean, I've dealt with it. Fortunately, I have a name that you can't really tell, but I, you know, grew up with people with names that sounded different, you know, different types of nationalities and then, you know, just having people wanting to name their children and not having that long view about what that looks like in society. And it's unfortunate that we have that bias, even with real estate, right? If I go to sell my house, I have to take all my pictures down because that's a real thing that they tell me to do. So you have these conversations with folks, right, to overcome these biases. And the biases are real. You talked a little bit about their reactions, but are people mostly receptive to these changes? And is that what you consider part of your secret sauce in terms of your coaching? Because you're willing to have these hard conversations?
Yeah, no, I think it's because what I'm not saying is, right, you know, whatever your name is, we're going to call you Susan. Like, we're not doing that, right? You still have to be who you are, right? But I think being who I am, the way that I deliver this is not about we need to change you. It's about the world is really awful out there. And you might not say it to me, but if I say it to you, we're creating a safe space. Like whether you feel it or not, yes, I agree with you, Sarah, or actually, no, that doesn't happen to me. Great, fantastic. But, you know, I suppose because I don't worry about having these conversations. It doesn't worry me because I'm a good person and it's meant with the best intention. So if I get things wrong, but at least I try, right? And so I think that's where people are receptive to it because it is delivered with positivity and with their best interests at heart.
And I'm assuming you do the same thing that people who face ageism. So there's the bias around ageism that I hear about a lot. I mean, I personally don't understand it. And here's what I mean by I don't understand it. If you present yourself well and that you have experience, then you're going to be easy to work with, right? All that experience is great. I do, however, because I'm a hiring manager, I would interview people that would give away their age with sayings like, yeah, we ran it up the flagpole and we had to deal with all these muckety mucks and things like that, or all these platitudes that, you know, one of my team members, if they were part of the interview, they say, what is this person talking about? How are you helping those deal with ageism better in using your same techniques?
Well, first of all, I think there's quite a bit of perceived ageism.
Yeah.
So where people are applying for so many jobs and they are not getting these keywords in and they're not getting to the top of the list, their perception is, well, it must be about my age because I am competent. I have been called before. People used to chase after me and call me, and they don't realize really that this world is actually very different. But sometimes when you look at their CV, I'm like, but you can't tell how old you are on the CV. And they're like, huh. But in their head, they've convinced themselves that the only thing it could possibly be is their age. And one of the things that I would suggest to people is like just looking at your own document, like how can you shroud some of that? And it's the last 10 years tend to be, Curtis, the biggest part of what we're bringing into the future. Anything else doesn't really matter, but you might have some really good companies on there, or you've got some good job titles. We worry about our CV as part of our ego, that we want to say to people, look where I've been. Look, I started as a pot washer and look where I am now. No one cares. No one cares. They just want to know, can you do the job I'm paying you for? They don't care about, washing pots in 1996. They don't care. Actually, we need to take some of the stuff off, but we can just put early career. We don't have to put loads of details, and we don't have to put dates. If you've got a qualification that needs to be renewed every year, like in the UK, you might have a first aid qualification that you'd renew annually, that you'd put the date on that.
Mhm.
But degree, why? Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter whether it was last week or 20 years ago, you still have that qualification. So removing some of that can remove the bias from the process, but also help you know that when you're going into those processes, that your age is kind of hidden behind some smoke and mirrors.
Got it. Okay. And what I heard you say is that people basically age themselves out two ways. One, their own thinking, and then in the other, not keeping up with what's happening, what's really happening, so that you don't say that it must be because I'm older.
Yeah. And, even like some of the things like what you were saying is that I think sometimes people get so stuck in their ways, and we do as we get older, because we don't like change so much, because we've seen it all. And, that is like that. But when you're trying to get into new positions, you need to like update your lingo, some of your skills that you have, especially if you've been in your last company for a decade or two.
So you tell people like it is. Were you born this way?
I am a people pleaser, Curtis. I was bullied at school. So I became small. Well, I was overweight, so I was big, but in my mind, I became small. And I think what happened was I had some people believe in me in my working life. I managed groups of people. I've got an extroverted personality, so things just come out, and for the good and the bad sometimes. And I think as I managed people, as I looked after people, I made a ton of mistakes. I had to stand up for people, that where I couldn't stand up for myself, I started standing up for other people, that I called myself a shield, that to my team, I let them get on with the job and I would take the hits. That if people were complaining, come to me. You want to moan about something, but you want to make more work come our way, you need to talk to me. And I would protect those people from that. And I think that's kind of how I've got to this point, where I didn't like seeing unfairness. I didn't like seeing where people got, they got passed over for promotions and they never got any feedback, and it didn't seem fair. That I would sort of elbow my way to the front and be like, well, why are we doing that? I probably didn't do it for myself as much, but I felt because I care about people, I've got an empathic nature, that like it was easier to do that.
Was there an inflection point in your life, like the thing that happened that sort of showed you where you recognized that you made this change?
Yeah, it was the last job that I was in, actually. I don't know whether you believe in anything like guardian angels or like things like that.
I'm a person, but I get it.
But I went to this organization, and I went there because the last company was 2 hours away. My little girl had just started nursery and I needed to be closer. The money was good and all that. But honestly, the boss was not a good person. And the person that was reporting into me, one of them, she'd just come back from sick leave because my boss had bullied her. And this lady was reporting into me. And I remember when I first met her, her hands were shaking. And I was like, oh, I'm not that scary. And then as we sort of built a relationship and built some rapport, that she opened up to me about what had happened to her over the last year, that she'd been away from work for 6 months and she'd worked in the company for a decade or more, and that this had happened to her. And I thought, God, it's like work can make you feel like this. And so I protected her from this woman. But in that meantime, that we built her confidence, that where I remember one of the last meetings I was in with her, where the first one, she was ever so quiet and she was letting people walk all over her. And I remember this last meeting that we were in, she was running this project meeting like a boss. She was calling people out, and not in a bad way, but she was pulling them in and being like, well, why is this not like that? You need to do this. You need to do that. And I remember sat there and I think I had tears in my eyes, because it sort of appeared to me what a difference had been made in 9 months. that this woman was really holding her own. And, I think and it was only a couple of weeks later that my role was announced as being redundant. And I kind of, one of my favourite characters, Curtis, is Mary Poppins. You come when you don't need her, but you come when you don't want her, but when you want her, she has to go.
Mhm.
And I kind of I remember leaving, and I felt so happy about leaving because the rest of it was not very nice. But I remember thinking to myself, I feel like I've really made a difference, like a real marked improvement in someone's life.
Mhm.
We never know normally, do we? They read it at our funerals, but I really felt that I'd made a difference.
Yeah. I mean, you don't know. Sometimes somebody will see this podcast and it'll make a difference and we just don't know. But the idea is to just keep putting it out there in the world. And so when you were bullied at that time, were you an extrovert then? Or was this inflection point when you consider yourself an extrovert? Because you had mentioned that you were extroverted.
Yeah, I don't know because being a kid, you kind of,
Yeah.
just a pain in someone's rear end, aren't you? But I'd moved from the north of England. So I'd moved from Leeds to the south where we speak differently. As you'll know, Curtis, the accent's a bit stronger up there. And, I was bullied for my accent because I was different, essentially. And yeah, and I don't really know who I was at that time. I bended to keep your head, you bend to keep your head.
And I asked that because I'm extroverted too, or at least my Myers-Briggs type indicator tells me I'm an extrovert. I imagine that many of your clients, though, are introverts. And how is it working with those clients? Is it different based off of extroverts or introverts, or it's just kind of the same no matter what? You just have to find that thing with each and every one of them.
I think the thing I like about introverted people is that a lot of the time, introverted people, in my opinion, have been tarred with this shy brush, and they've been told that they're shy, and they've been told that they're not people and all of that, when really it was just their personality type all along. And that kind of breaking confidence, well, why can't you do that? Well, let's just go try it anyway, and I suppose one of the things I really pride myself on is that if I give you some advice, if you don't like it and you don't feel like you can do it, let's find another way. This is the action that we've got to take, but let's find a different way to make it make sense to you. That if you're not the person that's going to stand on a table and be like, hello, everybody, I need a job. Let me tell you about myself. If that's not you, let's find another way. Where people talk about, should I be posting on LinkedIn? I'm like, well, do you want to post on LinkedIn? No. Okay, well, don't do it then. It's should I be doing all this? And oftentimes we need to do what feels good, and gets the best out of us.
I really like that. I have seen a lot of advice given. I've even given advice myself, and I base it off of me and the things that I've done. And I would often say when somebody says they want something, and I say, well, if you want it, do this. This is how I got it. And when they don't do this, I go, I don't understand. Right? You said you wanted it. You said you wanted it the way that I have it. This is how I did it. But I think your approach is much, much better in that you can still get them to wanting something or to the goal by looking at it from a different lens. So I think that is very profound. I mean, I feel like I'm learning something right here and talking to you and how I communicate. Hey, I just wanted to take a quick break to say thank you for tuning into the Vision to Reality podcast. If you're enjoying the show, be sure to hit subscribe so you never miss an episode. And if you're ready to level up your business or career, I've got some great resources for you. To turn your business vision into reality, my book, Vision to Reality, Start Working, Start Living, is available now and filled with strategies to help you bring your goals to life. Plus, the companion Vision to Reality digital workbook is the perfect tool to guide you step by step through the process. You can grab both at curtisljenkins.com. And if you're preparing for your next job search, check out my book, The Only Job Search Book You Will Ever Need. This book uses proven marketing strategies that have been used for over 60 years to help you rise above competition to land your dream job. You can grab your copy at curtisljenkins.com. And I have great news. This book will be updated with a new version that includes recent impacts on the job search process, such as remote work, AI, government policy changes, and much more. Thanks again for listening. Now let's get back to the conversation.
You know, the old adage, you know, there's more than one way to skin a cat.
Yeah.
You know, I think it's the same for everything that,
Yeah.
you know, one of the things that I learned, like being a people manager,
Yeah.
that like it would be so obvious to me. Well, like all you need to do, exactly what you say, Curtis, all you need to do is this. And then it's just like, well, why? Why are you not doing that? And
Yeah.
I'd find myself be really frustrated and like I just don't understand it. And I started to learn more about personality types and values. Have you ever done a values assessment, Curtis?
Yes, I have.
It's, you know, one of those things is so important too, because like, you know, you and I could, even though we're both extroverted, we could look at a scenario and feel very different about it. The one I give an example of is that if you saw a mother stealing baby food in a supermarket, one of us might think, call the police immediately, she's stealing. Another one might think, her baby's probably really hungry. Like, I'm just going to turn a blind eye and I'll probably just go and buy her basket of groceries. You know, that actually neither person is wrong. We just have very different values and see the world in a different way. Actually, to be honest, I think if we all did a values assessment and appreciated each other a little bit more, there would probably be less shenanigans going on, Curtis, don't you think?
Yeah. 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 And to add to that point, maybe the other thing I look for is maybe you don't have to do it my way, but I think inaction is not an option, right? So take the action based off of your values, but taking no action is to be a death knell.
Yeah, I agree.
So who have you helped? Give me this one person. You don't have to provide your details, but it's somebody that you think about that made a difference in your life and maybe even made you different. And you're so proud of the work that you've done with them. Who was that person? What was the scenario and what was the outcome?
There's a couple actually. There's one quite a while ago, the lady who had really bad anxiety. She'd quit her job because she just couldn't handle it anymore. She had a little girl who was starting to experience this anxiety too, because it flies its way around the household, doesn't it? And she wanted to get back to work. She wanted to feel who she wanted to feel. She'd been in therapy for a year, but she just needed the next thing. And I kind of, in the nicest way, Curtis, I grabbed her by the scruff of the neck and was like, so you're ready, are you? All right, let's go. Because she sort of, you know, I was always very kind to her because she did have these things that she wanted to overcome, but you could tell by speaking to her, you know, she earned like probably about $20,000 a year. Like she wasn't an idiot. She just had this deep set anxiety that was really holding her back. So we went through like some of the things, like why they would hold her back, put things into context and perspective, and got her to sort of stand outside of herself and look at actually the world as it was, not as she thought it was going to be. And it made a difference that she got onto a rejoiners program in a company that were supporting people coming back to work after long periods of time. And she really thrived. You know, she's moved on since then. But I suppose these small moments I think about, she sent me, she used to do like crafts, and she sent me like a Christmas, like a handmade bauble thing. And I think it was that I was so touched that she, you know, you're paying me essentially. And so I was so touched that she even thought to put something together for me that was really, that took her time and energy and all of that. And within that, we found strategies. And the thing that just came back to me was that we talked about, I said to her, like, when you think of your anxiety, what does it look like? And she said, it's a red ball of yarn. It's all tangled and awful. And I was like, great, can we get one of those? And so she had a physical representation of her anxiety. And we talked about putting it in a jar, closing the lid and just looking at it, because we've put it away now. And because she was quite creative as a person, the strategy for this was, how can we make this a physical thing? How can we get her to look at this, imagine it, put it in her pocket, you know, that it becomes a physical thing that she can put down. I can put my anxiety over there. And, you know, this, for me, it's not something that, you know, I'm not a trained therapist. That wasn't my job. But from the things that I've learned about people, psychology, personality types and all of that, and just kind of understanding people a little bit more, it is, how can we make this work for you? And so we tried something and it worked.
I like that. I really, really like that. And so did you want to tell me about the second story?
So it's more recent, actually. So lady she's on multi-six figures. She lost her job a little while ago, probably over a year ago now. And she joined my a 45-day sprint program. And we were getting towards the end of her 45 days. And I'm a bit of an overachiever, Curtis. If people aren't doing what I think they should be doing, I said to her, let's have another call, shall we? And like, what am I doing wrong here? Like, what else could I have done through this time? And she said, to be honest, I've had a lot on. There's been family stuff, other stuff. I probably haven't done as much as I could, and probably affecting her confidence a little bit. And I was like, right, okay, so what are we going to do? And we put in like a couple of plans that we were going to do. She's such an incredible lady, ever so smart. You just want to listen to her the whole time, because she's just, one of those people that's just got this amazingness about her, but it kind of been kept in a box, for a little while, because she's been out of work for a while. And we had a chat, and we talked about, the sort of organisation she wanted to go for. She'd been told by a recruiter no. So I've sent my CV to a recruiter. They've said no, that I was only allowed to send 2 CVs, and I've sent them, so I can't send yours. I don't like no, Curtis. It's not my favourite word. So I said, well, let's see if we can find out who it was. So if the recruiter had told us who the client was, that would obviously be off the table. But they didn't. So we detectived it out together, and we went and found, and she got this invigoration for this sort of like project. And she found a couple of folks that it might be, in organisations it might be. And she was like, well, what do I do now? And I was like, just send your CV. Like, what's the worst that's going to happen? You're going to get ignored. But we're getting ignored anyway. Who cares? And so she sent that note, and within 24 hours, she had a response back that said, hey, we're actually we really want to speak to you. And they spoke to her the next day. And then the Monday of the next week, she had an interview for that post. And I think what I showed her was that don't take no for an answer. Even if you're not feeling confident, if you've just got me next to you going, go on, come on, let's do it, kind of egging her on a little bit, nothing bad will happen. And if it does, then we'll deal with that then. But we're not doing anything wrong. Like, we're sticking up for ourselves, and we're pushing ourselves forward and doing all of these things, these little actions, this little course correction I was talking about, that if we just accepted that the recruiter said no, then that would be that.
Yeah. A lot of what you talk about is basically confidence to go beyond what your current confidence level is, the confidence to try different things, to look at the world different. And I'm fascinated by your claim of 45 days, right? So what we're taught is, hey, let's have 6 months of savings to manage an emergency. You, in a month and a half, following your program, you will land the job. Talk to us more about what is that program, and why is it so great that you can do it in 45 days?
So let's have a little caveat, first of all, so that we can't guarantee 45 days for anyone, right? Because different levels, amount of jobs, industries, there are so many things. And if you don't do the work, like, I can't be responsible for that. So the little caveat. But what I found was, when I was working with people individually before I started the sprint, was that about 35 days, everything seemed to change. I say to the people that I talk to, if you do what I tell you, you will see marked improvements. So at 35 days, people were on second interview. This is people, we're thinking of people who've been out of work and have been looking for 6 months. So, people that come to me that are just starting to look, it makes no sense, because they can probably get the job, they might be able to get a job. It might be really easy, whatever. But the people I really love helping are the ones where they feel it's impossible, where I'm their last resort. And one of the guys in it at the moment, he's been in the program for 3 weeks and 3 days, and he's had 3 interviews. And, a recruitment cycle is longer than that. We're moving things. A chap that had been out of work for 5 months, he started his 6 weeks with me, and he got his job in 42 days. And that's a 6-figure job. It's not a baby job. I'm not making them get jobs at Starbucks or whatever.
Right.
The people that I help are mid to senior hires, moving up to multi 6 figures. So some of these things and these processes do take longer, but by 35 days, people know exactly what they should be doing. Sometimes people don't get there, and like I said about this lady, that, I want to come back in and check in with her and think, well, what did I not do here? Like, could I have done better to help her? And the lesson that I've learned is I need to check in with people a little bit more. I need to have pushed that conversation week 2, week 3, but we're all learning every day, right?
Yeah.
Those kind of check-ins, those making sure that people are okay and they know what they're doing. You know, I talk about checking their homework, you know, that they're sending their documents off, and I'm like, just let me have a look. Just let me see. And then I can pick up like little problems, little things that they've, you know, that are not quite right, or they're going to make a bit of a difference. Because if you think about it, Curtis, that we look for jobs like 4 or 5 years, sometimes longer. Everything that we learned last time, we've forgotten. So we're starting again. Like, what am I doing with my CV? What kind of achievements am I writing? What is the world looking for now? Should it be in a PDF or a Word document? Can I use Apple Pages? I've got to do a pretty document. Can I use InDesign? No, is the answer. Do it in a Word document because of formatting, for the love of God. You know, there's all these things that people don't know, but somebody like me lives and breathes this every single day. You know, that if you ask me about certain industries, I can tell you that, you know, like telecoms, it's not doing so well at the moment. And so people in that area are going to suffer, you know, but I also know people who've pivoted into other industries and other opportunities, and we've got some contacts over there, you know. So whilst we can't guarantee landing a job, everyone has got an interview by the end of those 45 days. Absolutely. I should probably put that as a guarantee, shouldn't I? And if they haven't, I will do my absolute damnedest to make sure that I understand why and that they have the tools to help them. Because, Curtis, this isn't just my job. This is my purpose. Like, I volunteer at my local colleges to help people early on. You know, the messages that I send on LinkedIn, you know, a lot of people have been out of work for a long time and they can't afford me to help them. But what I can do is I can send them a little video, or I can send them a little bit of advice. They'll send me their CV and I'll drop them a quick voice note and just give them a little bit of help. This is my purpose. So it's not just about come into my program and let me take your money. It's actually, I need to help you get a job.
Yeah, I love that. You're living your purpose. You're taking your vision and making it real through your purpose. Your 45-day program has 5 steps. You want to describe those?
Yeah, so we start with a job search strategy. This strategy is kind of the foundation and the bedrock of the program. So it's kind of taking all of the resources on the internet that are so overwhelming for people and boiling them down into a few things that we need to do. So we need to talk about job boards, recruiters, you know, networking, events to go to, all of those sorts of things. We also have a CV session. So my belief is, and all the CV writers will hate me for this, is that most CVs, even if they're a bit naff, are actually fine. If you put them into a human's hands. You've recruited people before, Curtis. I bet you've seen some god-awful documents with some of the best people. Am I right?
Yes. Yes. And some
And you,
look at the resume. Sometimes I'm
right.
talking to you first. I'll have the resume on the side in one of my screens, and I'll look at it after because I don't want the resume to bias me if I already had a team pick this person and through the resume. Yeah.
And conversely, you would have had a resume that is absolutely beautiful and the person is god awful. Am I right?
Absolutely.
Right. So your piece of paper is kind of a moot point.
Yes.
So my belief is that if you put that document into human hands and the human is looking for that kind of person, that they will like either call you or kind of promote you in that work way. The thing that I do is get it into their hands. So we use technology, we use AI, but we also need to humanize it. So people using AI for your resumes and your CVs, you need to make sure you put some human into it because we can all tell. So we talk about being able to adapt the CV quickly and easily so we can apply for these jobs at pace, but without it burning us out. I'm sure you would have heard of people applying for hundreds and hundreds of jobs a day and just feeling completely and utterly exhausted by it. The next step for us is networking. So what I think, Curtis, I don't know whether you've noticed this, but since COVID and been quite digitized, that we've forgotten how to talk to each other. We've forgotten how to just have these kind of nurturing conversations where we just catch up with each other. You know, when we used to be in offices and we'd go make a cup of tea and we would just have a little chat about, what your kid's doing and, all the rest of it. Oh, I like your shoes and all that and this kind of human building stuff. And now we're at home or we're, working from a separate place and we book time in to talk to each other. we book an hour in and we go, right, 9 o'clock, we're talking about this project, and we just go for it, and we forget these sort of niceties which actually make us human. So the networking part of it, what I'm kind of picking up anecdotally is that people used to recommend me. People used to call me about jobs, and they don't anymore. Probably because I'm old. No, it's not that you're old. It's because we've forgotten to do this. It's just, it has to feel really purposeful now. So instead of waiting for people to come to us, Curtis, what I teach people is how to go out without being demanding or without feeling desperate. So being confident and going out there and saying, Curtis, it's been such a long time since I've seen you. I know we worked together 10 years ago, but I'm reconnecting with my network. Really lovely to see you. Now, Curtis, look, you had a little smile on your face, even though we've only just met properly. But wouldn't it be lovely to get that message from someone you met 10 years ago?
Absolutely.
Because even though they might be contacting you for you to help them, they remembered you. You were someone in their life 10 years ago that they thought, I want to talk to Curtis.
Yeah.
And building on this psychology is that we can do this without it seeming disingenuous or without it feeling like we are
Bothering people
we're bothering people. And
a lot.
yeah, I don't want to bother you. Actually, do you know what? Some people love to be bothered, especially when they're working on someone else's dime. You know, if I'm sat in my job at Coca-Cola and it's a bit boring and like somebody calls and they say, well, can you, meet me for half an hour? Absolutely. I would love to, So what I think is that if we were all a little bit braver and we put ourselves out there, I would guarantee you that nobody that you contacted that you used to work with that you actually would like to talk to would tell you no. It just wouldn't happen. Networking is such a huge part, and being able to ask people for things.
That's right.
It's what you said before about confidence. And what's the next bit? So the next bit is about interview prep. We actually are never taught how to interview, Curtis. I don't know whether it happens in the States, but we don't get taught it either. We get told about the STAR format. You familiar with the STAR format, Val?
Very familiar with the STAR format. And I do use it often, and I'm trying to drive people into the STAR format, but sometimes people just can't connect to it. So tell me about your style with it. Because
we just tell the story in STAR.
Yeah.
But we don't really know why we're doing it.
Yeah.
Like the feeling behind it is not there. So I'll break it down for people. So what we're doing is telling a story. Now, are you guys familiar with the Gruffalo story, the kid's story?
No.
The Gruffalo? No. But we're going on a bear hunt?
No, not me.
We need to find an American reference. Right. So a children's story that you might have read as a kid, a really famous one. And there's probably a monster that comes out about page 14. Now, if the monster came out on the first page, the story's over. We like anticipation. We love stories. We're human beings. Your friend came up to you, Curtis, and you said, oh my God, what happened to your nose? And they said, listen to this. I got chased by a dog. I tripped over my bag, and I smashed my face into the floor. Now, they didn't have to tell you about being chased by a dog and like all of this other stuff, but we love stories.
Right.
Humans love it. It's how we connect to each other. And what we tend to do with this STAR format is give a bunch of statements. So tell me about a time you dealt with a difficult customer. Well, I had a difficult customer. They called on the phone. They were shouting at me. I calmed them down. That was it. That was the end of it. Great. But it doesn't tell me much, really. It doesn't give me any peril. It doesn't give me any context of what's going on. So what about this? Customer called. They were shouting on the phone because our delivery team had just dropped something through her roof. She had a small baby and she was really, really angry. That's the situation. Give me context. It's almost like I'm asking you, Curtis, to look over my shoulder and I'm describing a situation to you. And what people tend to do is miss out that piece so much that we're just kind of, I'm assuming that you know what I'm talking about. And actually, where we like stories, we want to know what's happening.
Yeah.
I always say, Curtis, that we can use like words, or we can we can talk about these things, but to make ourselves feel smart. But if the other person feels stupid, we're not going to win. So if you're explaining something without telling them what's going on, then you're going to make them feel dumb. And, even if you've got, your potential boss in front of you, if an administrator is taking notes and they can't understand the stupid jargon that you're using, or they don't really get it, they're not going to take good notes and they're not going to give good feedback about it. So usually the action part of your interview, people deliver on every time. That's the bit that they know. But the situation and the result, the top and tail of that story are really important. So if you can imagine that, think of your favorite kid's story or one that you tell your own children, and that meander through the woods before you get to the crux, the action, the monster, that is just as important. Otherwise, it wouldn't be there. So that would be so much to interviews. And then the last part is for the job search strategy, it's about community. And most of the people, like I said, have been home alone for months. And we go from being as part of a team to then being alone, not having anyone to bounce off, not having anyone to have a bit of a laugh with. Like it just goes to silence where we don't know if we're doing something right. We don't know whether we're doing it wrong. We can't iterate by ourselves. So as part of it, we have community calls. So twice a week, there's space for people to come, give updates, tell people what they're doing. The people that are further on in the process, they're buoying the people that have just started, where they can see like someone's announcing that they've got a job offer or they're at final stage or they negotiated a really big salary or, whatever. It gives those people hope. And that's what we all need, Curtis. We need hope. We need to be able to look forward and go, that's going to be me soon. Where they can see, even if it's not happening for them right this minute, that they know that people further down the line have done it and they've made it and they were in the same spot as them. So there's a community part of it and a LinkedIn chat that I put everyone in. And they just, it's not kind of full of pictures of people's dinner and all of that, but it's where people just say, I've just finished this application or I've just got called for an interview today, and people do emojis and claps and well done and all of that. And even though it feels kind of silly that we need this, but we all need a pat on the head. We all need to be felt like we can tell somebody that, oh my God, I've got an interview today, especially if you live alone, because you've got no one to tell, So, they're the 5 bits. So the strategy, the CV, the networking, the interviews, and the community.
I love it. And ending with the community, really, you don't end with it. That's part of it. That's part of the program the whole time, right? And one of the things that we talk about with job search is the isolation. So I like how you put it all together: strategy, CV session, networking, interview prep, and community. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah. And, really good people, and they're part of it. When somebody gets, they feel, they get a job, they're so grateful to be part of the community, that they've had each other.
Absolutely. Absolutely. In fact, all the successful programs have a community, right? So when I want to learn something, the first thing I do is find a community that's doing it, right? Maybe even volunteer with that community. So what's next for Sarah Bryer?
Well, the big dream is to be able to teach people in employability, so that are working for government programs, how to do what I do. There's only me. I'm not interested in taking on staff and all of that. It's too much of a headache, Curtis. And I like my freedom to do what I want. But I'm working with a consultant at the moment who's helping me kind of put this together, so that actually in the UK, our employability people, there's no real training. There's like careers training, but that's kind of it, but not how to put a CV together, not how to use AI when it comes to your job search, not how to do proper interview prep. It's all kind of passed down from a PowerPoint from 1992. So that's my big thing, that I want to teach people what I know so that they can help more people.
So how will people find you?
So you can find me at sarahbryer.co.uk. You can come and hang out with me on LinkedIn, come and connect with me and listen to my musings. Often I say things that job seekers are afraid to say because they're worried that it will impact their job search. So if you want to come and tell me that a company have behaved badly, I will talk about it on your behalf while keeping you anonymous. That's it.
I got to tell you about your LinkedIn musings, because that's what made me want you as a guest on the show. I admired them. In fact, one of the things I saw today was a gentleman saying something about you guarantee 45 days. And you did a great job of explaining what that is and how you put your whole self into it. But I just love the different ways that you present to job seekers and people on LinkedIn. So thank you very much for being part of the show. It's been an extreme pleasure.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a real blessing.
All right. So Hey, this was a great conversation, everyone. And thank you for joining us again for another episode of the Vision to Reality podcast. And until next time, we'll see you then. Take care. That's a wrap on today's episode of the Vision to Reality podcast. A huge thank you to today's guests. You can find all of their contact information in any resources mentioned in the show notes below. Also, can you do me a big favor? If you found today's conversation valuable, I'd love for you to subscribe, leave a comment and a review, and share it with a friend or colleague who could benefit from the information shared today. And remember, vision without action is just a dream. Let's turn those big ideas into reality. I'll see you in the next episode.